If you're unsatisfied with where you are as a teen, I can almost guarantee that it's because of your bad habits. And I know this because, especially during COVID, I was just this fat video gamer that did literally zero good habits. I'd play video games for hours every single day. I'd numb myself with hours of scrolling, and I'd binge eat almost every single day. I literally did zero good habits in this time too. I didn't exercise, I didn't study, and I didn't even brush my teeth, bro. Like, I was down bad. But 2 years ago, I read this book called Atomic Habits right here, and this book has literally changed my life. After reading this, I was able to lose 15 pounds, become a straight A student, and quit all of my addictions, bro. After reading this book, I literally love life again. And I can tell you it's all because I changed one thing in my life, which was my habits. The advice that I'm about to give in this video changed my life forever. And so if you want to have the same results as me, then I'd recommend that you watch till the end. If you just give me 10 or 15 minutes of your time, I will change the trajectory of your life by giving you the 4-step roadmap that this book gave me to quit all of the bad habits and consistently do all of the good habits that I used to struggle with. Habits pretty much control the entirety of your life right now. Everything from you clicking Y and enter to get onto YouTube really quickly, or you switching off the light bulb, is all a habit. And what this book tells us is that habits are composed of 4 parts: the cue, the craving, the response, and the reward. So I'm not really going to explain what each one of those means because it's not really that important, but basically, using the framework that this book gives us, we can pretty much engineer habits into our lives so that we can actually gain control of where we're going. And so let's begin with law 1 of this book in building habits: make it obvious. So here's the thing: when your brain doesn't see or realize that you want to create a habit, it's not going to do it. And that seems pretty obvious, right? But I used to be such an idiot for so long when it came to me trying to do these good habits, because here's what I do. I tell myself in the start of the day, I want to study today, I want to study more. And then I would just stop there. I wouldn't plan anymore. And so what would happen was that I would push the habit off more and more. And I'd eventually forget about it until the end of the day. And then I'll feel all sad, like, oh, I didn't study today. I guess I'll try again tomorrow. When you say things like, I want to exercise more, I want to study more, it's not obvious enough for your brain. What you actually need is a specific time and place where you're going to do the habit. So instead of you saying, I want to study, or I want to study today, you need to tell yourself, okay, from 12 to 1 p.m., I'm going to study in my math workbook for an hour. You need to be that specific with your habits, and you need to write it down. This sounds so simple and you might not even want to do it, but I guarantee if you're struggling with your bad habits right now, it's because you're not doing these things. When you don't have a specific time and place for when you're going to do a habit, well, of course you're going to push it off. And so what I found was that as soon as I started doing this, I completely stopped procrastinating on the good habits, because now I had a plan for when I'm going to do them. If you want to take this further, this is what I do. Take a piece of paper, or take the notes app on your laptop, whatever it might be, and write down what you're going to do, at least the important tasks for each hour of the day. So if you want to study for this thing, block out from 10 to 1 o'clock, I'm going to do that. From 5 to 6 p.m., I'm going to exercise. Basically what you're doing here is you're going to basically block out each part of the day. I'll put a screenshot up of how I do this, and it's sort of going to look like your school calendar. You know how your school calendar might have, like, okay, from this time to this time we have science, math, whatever. That's what you want to do with your time. You want to block it out so that instead of you acting based on your emotions on what you're going to do in the moment, you're going to already have a plan that you just need to follow through with. And you might be kind of turned off by me telling you, like, schedule out each hour of your day, because it just seems kind of weird, right? But think about it. Every single CEO, businessman, professional athlete that I've read about does this. Every single top achiever schedules out exactly what they're gonna do with their time. Because imagine 2 versions of yourself. One of them goes through the day without any plan at all. They don't know when they're gonna do anything. They're just acting based on emotion. He's not actually gonna be doing any good habits because he's deciding what to do based on emotion. But meanwhile, the other person has a specifically blocked out time for each task in the day. He's gonna at least have 50% more of a chance of getting that work done. And so even if his emotions come up and tell him, oh, I don't feel like doing it, he's gonna do it. And if he doesn't, he's gonna have accountability because he procrastinated and he knows that he did. And so that's the first tip that I can give you. Schedule out each part of your day and write down exactly when you're gonna do each of the habits that you want to do. This one thing literally made me 10 times more able to actually do the good habits. And if you just take away one thing from this video, let this be it. Write down when you're gonna do the habits so that you actually do them. On the other hand, if you want to get rid of the bad habit from your life, you need to make it invisible. It cannot be obvious to you. If you have junk food lying all over the house, you're gonna be triggered to eat it, especially if you're already pretty fat and you really don't have that willpower built up yet to resist that junk food. And so why would you put that pressure on yourself? It's like if you put bottles of alcohol around an alcoholic, he's gonna be triggered to drink it. And so what we need to understand is that your environment, the notifications that come up on your phone, the junk food on the table, those are all triggering you and influencing you to do that habit. And so what I'm really getting at here is you need to make the bad habits invisible to you. I struggled a lot with binge eating because every single time I'd see that chip bag, I'd eat it, right? So the first thing that I did is that I put away most of the junk food, most of the things that I didn't want to eat in the cupboard out of sight. I wasn't throwing it out of the house. I wasn't burning it or anything. I just kept it away. And what I found was that doing just that, putting it away in a certain place, already made me binge eat a lot less, because now every single time I walked into the kitchen, for example, I made the bad habit invisible so I didn't do it. But this is also where the book and I disagree, because here's the thing. If I were to completely hide all of the junk food, I'd still be triggered. Like, let's say a friend gave me some junk food, I'd still be triggered to eat it. Because here's the thing. If you want to resist the bad habits, you need something called the willpower. That's pretty much just the thing that you use to resist the bad habits. So if I put junk food on the table in front of you, you would use willpower to resist it and not eat it. So willpower is sort of like a skill in a video game. And what I found is that when I made all of the bad habits completely invisible, that means that my willpower level stayed right here because I wasn't using it. Because every single time you resist something successfully, it's almost like you're adding XP to that willpower skill. And so what I found is that you shouldn't completely eradicate the bad things. Like, for example, the junk food is still somewhere in my house. And what I do is that every few days, I take a piece of junk food and I put it on my desk. And what I do is I just stare at it and I resist it. This seems kind of weird, like almost like you're torturing yourself. But pretty much, you need to sort of exercise your willpower. You need to train it so that not only are you making the bad habits invisible, but even when somebody gives it to you, you don't do them. So pretty much, in short, put away all of the bad habits. Take them out of your environment so that they don't trigger you. But at the same time, every few days, consciously put the bad habits in your environment so you can learn to use your willpower and ignore them. And so that's law 1 of Atomic Habits. Make the habit obvious or invisible. Now, the second law of Atomic Habits tells you to make the habit attractive. And this part is a lot about your mindset towards the things that you do every day. And the most important thing that I learned in this book about this part is this one concept that I learned called instant and delayed pleasure. So here's how it works. Basically, there's 2 types of pleasure in life. There's instant pleasure and there's delayed pleasure. And they both give you pleasure, but just in different ways. Now, instant pleasure is pretty much anything that gives you pleasure right now, but gives you pain later. So for example, if I were to scroll on TikTok for the next 4 hours, right now it's really pleasurable. It feels good while I'm scrolling. But as soon as I stop it, and as soon as I confront the fact that I just wasted 4 hours, I feel pain. And so whenever you do something that's instantly pleasurable, you're gonna also experience pain afterward. However, it also works in the opposite way. When you do something that's painful right now, when you do a good habit, for example, it feels painful right now. Studying right now feels hard. But as soon as you finish doing that, as soon as the study session's over, you feel good. And so what this chapter of making the habit attractive really taught me was just, you need to classify, you need to understand what the habits in your life are doing to you. Change your mindset about the habits that you do every day. Pain, as in studying, as in exercising, hard things, creates growth and pleasure later. And so every single time you do something like eating junk food, playing video games, something that I learned from this book was just to call myself out whenever I would do the bad habit. So for example, when I was about to eat junk food, I tell myself right now I am choosing instant pleasure to make my future self suffer. Right now, I'm choosing weakness because I am weak right now and I don't want to go through the suffering of resisting this junk food. When I learned to just call myself out about these habits and tell myself that these are bad things, I automatically started doing them less, because even when I was eating the junk food, I'd feel guilty. When you tell yourself, oh, this is a bad thing, oh, I'm choosing to make my future self suffer more, those chips aren't even gonna taste good anymore. And so the biggest thing that I took away from this chapter again is just to realize the concept of instant pleasure and delayed pleasure. Every day, you need to seek out some form of pain, some form of effort that will cause growth later. And you need to do this every single day so that you can get the most growth. And when you do this consistently for a few days, weeks, months, or even years, that's when you make progress. And so that's law 2 of the Atomic Habits. Make the good habits feel attractive and make the bad habits look unattractive. And you do this by just reminding yourself of instant pleasure and delayed pleasure. Now, law 3 of Atomic Habits is make the habit easy. And this is the biggest hack that I found in order to be consistent with the good habits. Because let me just give you an analogy. In a video game, if you are at level 3, you're not going to try and beat the level 50 boss, right? Because you die immediately. You might get a few hits here and there, but you're ultimately not going to win. But for so long in real life, I kept on trying to do the level 50 tasks when I was at level 3. So for example, I didn't study that consistently, but for some reason I keep on trying to do 1 hour study sessions, 2 hour study sessions. While I would get some XP, I would be consistent for a few days. Ultimately, I'd quit because it was just too difficult. I didn't follow this law and try to make the habit easier. Habits are built through repetition, whether they're big or small. And that's the key point. When I tell you about repetition, it doesn't mean that you need to do a 2-hour study session or a 2-hour workout every day. When you just study for 5 minutes, when you just do one squat, you're adding XP to your XP bar, which over time lets you level up and do more of the good habit. And so this is the most important thing that I learned from this book. When you want to get consistent with doing the good habits, don't try and do them at level 50 difficulty because you're just going to quit immediately. What you need to do instead is just like how in a video game you'd start small with the small bosses. You need to start with small repetitions before you can get that XP and do bigger ones. So for example, don't do a 2-hour workout. Do 5 minutes of any exercise. Just do a few squats, a few push-ups, and a few sit-ups, and then call it a day. And you might think, oh wait, no, I'm not going to make any progress while doing that. Well, you weren't going to make any progress anyways doing a 2-hour workout because you wouldn't be consistent. Progress is made when you do something consistently for a longer period of time. And so even though we're only doing a 5-minute workout right now, you're going to make more progress over time because now you're going to be consistent for a few weeks. And over time, as you level up and you do these things more consistently, your capacity to do the good habits increases. Like, let me just give you another analogy. If I were to take some skinny dude from the street and try to make him squat 405 pounds, he wouldn't be able to do it. And so in the same way that you wouldn't try and squat 400 pounds on the first day of the gym, you shouldn't try and do a 2-hour study session. Start small and then increase it as you level up. Now, another thing that I learned from this chapter of making the habits easy is you need to prepare your environment so that you're triggered to do more of the good habits and less of the bad habits. Because let me just give you a common gamer problem that I used to have. Whenever I'd play games for hours every single day, I would have a water bottle on my desk and I'd need water. What I found was that I wouldn't actually get up and go get that water because I would need to get up, go downstairs, fill the water bottle, maybe even fill the jug, then drink the water and then go back upstairs. And so I just procrastinate. But what I found was that as soon as I started keeping full water bottles on my desk, I drank so much more water because I made it easier for myself. And what I also found is that you can also add friction, add difficulty to doing the bad habits so that you do them less. So for example, what I started doing was that I would put all of the junk food that I used to always eat in the cupboard. And every single time I wanted to eat it, I'd have to get up, go to the cupboard, go to the top shelf, and then try to reach for it. And while that may seem like it's not really that much of a big deal, what that ended up doing is that it stopped me from just mindlessly eating junk food. Because now it's not just on the table. I need to get up and go and get it. And so what's going to happen is that in that time between me trying to go get that junk food, I'd have this opportunity to resist the bad habit and realize, wait a minute, this is a bad thing. When you add friction to the bad habits, you make it more likely that you're able to resist them. And so those are the main things that I learned in Law 3 of Atomic Habits, which is basically make the habit more easy or difficult. And you do this by doing the good habits on a smaller scale so you do them more and consistently, while also putting the bad habits away and adding friction to them so that you don't do them as much. And so now we're on the final law of Atomic Habits. And also, by the way, if you made it this far in the video, I swear, you probably have a better attention span than 90% of guys. And so if you want to beat them, and if you want to get more advice on things like habits and discipline and quitting the bad habits in life, and go down and subscribe so that you get more videos just like this posted to your feed. If you don't know me, my name is Atharv, and I just help teens with things that I used to struggle with as well. Anyway, so lastly, we're on Law 4 of Atomic Habits. Make the habits satisfying. And now this law is a little bit different from the other laws because those laws affect whether or not you're going to do the habit now. This last law of making it satisfying is what's going to determine whether or not you do the habit again, because all your brain is really there for is to see what actions are going to give it the most reward with the least effort. And this is why things like video games and junk food are so dangerous, because they give you such a high amount of motivation, of dopamine, with the least amount of effort, and so you're going to try and do them more. Meanwhile, things like exercising and studying usually don't actually seem that rewarding. And so let me just give you some tricks that I use to make the good habits feel more satisfying so that I actually do them more compared to the bad habits. And the first thing that I learned to do was create this thing called a habit tracker. So habit tracker is literally just you writing down each day of the week on like a piece of paper and writing down whichever habit that you want to do. And what you do is every single time that you do that habit, again on a smaller scale, just like we learned in Law 3, I tick off that box. So for example, on Monday, if I study for 20 minutes, what I would do is that I would tick off that box. Even if it was only a 20-minute study session or a 10-minute study session, or even just 5 minutes, I tick the box off. when you have this piece of paper that you're ticking off each time, it's almost like in a video game where they give you like the quick rewards that you can see and you're leveling up. But I sort of turned that habit into a sort of game, like a video game. Each time I ticked it off, I would imagine it like I was getting XP for that habit, which would just sort of reinforce the feel-good feelings that you usually get from things like video games. That's the reason that video game developers add things like level bars and skill trees, because they want to see you progressing. They want you to get the feeling of progression. And so we can use that same tactic that they use on our own habits by doing things like creating habit trackers. Another thing that I did to make the good habits more satisfying is I would basically just tell myself good things when I would do the good habits. So for example, if I were to study for 20 minutes, for example, when I was done that study session, I just tell myself good things. Because what I used to do is I would go through that study session all like cranky and sad because my parents probably yelled at me to go study. But every single time that I actually studied on my own, even if I literally just did it for 5 minutes, I tell myself, I'm proud of myself today. I did a good habit. Future me is gonna have a better life because of me. Now, lastly, the thing that I would do to also make me more satisfied when I would do the good habits is just do something nice, but most importantly, not destructive after I did the good habit. So this is what most people try and do with things like exercise. They'll exercise for a few days and they'll be all consistent, and then they'll just have a massive cheat day, reversing all of the progress that they just made, and then telling themselves, oh, I'm rewarding myself. That's not how it works, bro. When you're doing the good habits, you don't want to reinforce them by doing bad habits afterwards, because that just creates a negative feedback loop where you're only doing the good habits because of the bad ones afterwards. But what I found was that when I did more pleasurable but still good habits after doing things like studying or exercise, that just made them seem better and more appealing to me. So for example, if I were to study for 30 minutes, what I do is that after the study session, I'd watch like 10 minutes or 20 minutes of self-improvement YouTube, like things like this video where I'm just helping you out. When you do something nice but not destructive after the good habit, you reinforce it so that it becomes more likely that you do it again. And so yeah, that's law 4 of atomic habits. Make the good habits feel satisfying by doing things like making them seem like a game with things like a habit tracker, and just telling yourself nice things and doing still pleasurable things after the good habit to reinforce them and make it more likely that you do it next time. And so those are the 4 laws of atomic habits that I used to completely change my life. And I'm telling you, if you did all of the actionable steps that I told you in this video, you will have a completely different life in just a few weeks. And so yeah, bro, that's all I have for this video. If you want more value like this, go down and subscribe. And as always, my name's Atharv. See you soon, bro.